Imagine this. A routine flight. Seems like nothing special, March 5th, 2025, over the Red Sea. But this one, it really cracked things wide open.
Yeah, what looked like just another surveillance run turned into something much bigger.
So what exactly happened?
Well, it involved a U.S. drone, an Mk9 Reaper. It took off from Djibouti,
Okay.
and while it was flying totally in international airspace over the Red Sea, Houthi forces targeted it, and they brought it down.
Wow. And those Reapers, they're not cheap, are they?
Not at all. You're looking at around, what, $30 million for that one drone? Just poof, gone.
30 million. But the key thing here, like you said, it wasn't just this one drone, was it? This was part of something bigger brewing.
Exactly right. This was actually the 12th drone the Houthis had managed to shoot down since 2023.
It's 12th.
Yeah. And what really raised the alarm bells, I think, was that just a few weeks before this, they'd actually tried to hit a manned U.S. jet, an F-16.
A manned fighter jet. That's a whole different level of escalation.
Definitely. So you take those drone losses and then you add in, 174 attacks on U.S. Navy ships and another 145 on commercial ships, all since 2023. It starts to paint a picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really suggests the old strategy just wasn't cutting it anymore. A shift seemed inevitable.
Absolutely. The persistence, the boldness of these attacks, it was a direct threat, not just to shipping, but to U.S. forces right there in the region. You really need that context to grasp why the response was so, significant.
And significant it was. Donald Trump apparently gave the green light for a major operation against the Houthis. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist.
No, this was a full-on military action. It kicked off Saturday, March 15th, 2025.
Okay, let's dive into how this actually went down. Phase 1 started with Tomahawk missiles, right? Tell us about that initial punch.
Right. So the missiles hit at 01.3 local time, March 15th. But the orders went out to the U.S. Navy destroyers in the Red Sea about half an hour earlier, around 01.00.
Okay.
The plan was built around this concept called time on top, using Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Time on top. Sounds precise. What does that actually mean in practice?
It's all about coordination. See, Tomahawks fly at about 515 miles per hour.
Right.
So the flight time to Samana, maybe 15 minutes or so. But they programmed these missiles to loiter.
Loiter, like circle around.
Exactly. If a missile got to the target area early, before that 01.30 strike time, it would just hang around, wait for the others.
Ah, so they all arrived together.
Precisely. The goal is simultaneous impact. Hit everything at the exact same second for maximum shock and, disruption.
Makes sense. Overwhelm them right at the start.
Yeah.
So where did these first Tomahawks hit? What were the targets?
They focused on some really key Houthi locations. First, Sana'a International Airport.
Why there?
It was known to be a big hub for their drone operations, storing them, launching them.
Got it. What else?
A military barracks, but this one was kind of tricky, located in a residential neighborhood downtown Sana'a.
Oh.
And then 4 Houthi command posts. These were clustered in the Jif neighborhood, which is in the Moose suburb of Sana'a.
Okay, so airport, barracks, command posts. Really going for the command and control of the C2 right away.
That was the idea. Cripple their ability to direct their forces from the very beginning.
Okay, so that's the opening move.
Yeah.
Tomahawks hitting key nodes. What came next? Sounds like air power wasn't far behind.
Not far at all. About 45 minutes after those Tomahawks hit, Phase 2 kicked off. This involved F-18s
Launched
from the aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman operating nearby. Their main mission was hitting a power station in a place called Dion.
A power station. Okay.
Yeah, that plus another 11 targets in the Sada Governorate.
And these F-18s, they weren't just dropping standard bombs, were they? I remember reading something about specialized weapons.
You're right. They were carrying AGM-154s, the JSOW's joint standoff weapons.
JSOW's glide bombs.
Yep. Pretty decent range, about 130 kilometers, carrying a 500-pound warhead. But the interesting part, many of these were modified.
How so?
They had these special nose plugs called Blue 111 penetrating nose plugs.
Penetrating? Sounds like they're meant to go deep.
Exactly. That modification lets the JSOW punch through some serious defenses. We're talking up to 20 feet of reinforced concrete.
20 feet, wow.
Or even 100 feet of earth before detonating. Absolutely vital for getting at those underground weapons bunkers the Houthis were using.
So basically bunker busters, but launched from a safe distance. Smart. And hitting the power station in Dion, That sounds like it would have a wider impact than just military sites.
Oh, absolutely. That power station supplied a huge chunk of the Houthi-controlled territory. Taking it out was meant to cause immediate widespread problems.
Disrupt everything.
Pretty much. And reports confirmed it. The lights went out across large parts of Yemen right after those strikes. And while it was happening, the F-18s kept hitting other targets in Sana'a, too.
Okay, so within the first hour or so, you've got missiles hitting command, drones, then jets taking out power, underground storage. It's a very systematic approach. But it didn't stop there. Long-range bombers got involved next.
That's right. Phase 3 started around 03:00 local time. 2 B-1 bombers joined the fight.
B-1s, where do they come from?
They were part of Task Force 242, flying out of Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey. They actually took off just before midnight.
Turkey. That's a fair distance.
It is. About 1,700 miles, cruising at around 647 miles per hour. It took them just under 3 hours to get there.
Arriving in the middle of the night after the power's already out makes them harder to spot, I imagine. And B-1s, they carry a lot of bombs, don't they?
A massive payload. Each one was loaded with a full salvo 24 missiles. AGM-158s, the JSMER.
JSSMER. What's special about those?
The ER stands for extended range. These things can fly over 1,000 kilometers.
1,000 kilometers. So the B-1s didn't even need to get close to Yemen.
Exactly. They could launch well outside the range of any air defenses the Houthis might have had. The max range on Houthi systems is maybe 120 kilometers, give or take. These B-1s were launching from way, way beyond that.
Staying safe. And I think you mentioned earlier, these JSSMs, can they also loiter like the Tomahawks?
Yes, they can. Same principle allows for another wave of perfectly synchronized strikes hitting multiple targets at the same instant.
Very coordinated. What were the B-1s hitting?
Their main targets were Houthi UAV facilities, drone factories, storage spots spread across the Al-Hudaydah governorate. Reports indicate they took out at least 8 major facilities.
8 drone facilities. That's a significant blow to their drone program.
Definitely aimed at degrading that capability. So, yeah, in just a few hours, command and control hit, power grid down, drone facilities smashed. A pretty effective sequence targeting their core abilities.
But the air assault kept going. F-15s came in next.
Indeed. Phase 4 began around 04:20 local time. Air Force F-15 Strike Eagles. These are fast jets, Mach 2.5 capable.
Where were they flying from?
Bases in Qatar and the UAE, and they were carrying heavy hitters. 2,000-pound JDAMs, Joint Direct Attack Munitions.
DAMs, big bombs. And their targets were a bit different, weren't they? Not just military bases.
That's right. This wave targeted 2 specific apartment buildings in the Ib Governorate.
Apartment buildings. Why?
Well, the intelligence apparently indicated the Houthis were using these buildings to store weapons. They'd reportedly kicked out the civilians and turned them into ammo dumps.
So the U.S. believed they were legitimate military targets, despite being apartment blocks.
That seems to be the rationale, yes. Calculated strikes against hidden weapons caches, even in civilian structures. Controversial, for sure, but aimed at hitting their weapons supply.
Okay. After the F-15s, things shifted towards electronic warfare. The Growlers came in.
Correct. Following the Strike Eagle attacks, the EA-18G Growlers moved in. These are based on the F-18 frame, but they're packed with electronics for jamming and attacking enemy defenses.
Suppressing enemy air defenses, or C?
Exactly. Their main weapon for this was the AGM-88 HARM missile, high-speed anti-radiation missile.
HARM. Those radar signals for
Precisely. They home in on electromagnetic emissions, specifically radar frequencies. They're looking for signals between 0.5 and 20 gigahertz.
Which covers
the bands Houthi air search radars typically use, around 4 to 8 gigahertz. So the Growlers could detect these radars when they were active, lock on from about 70 nautical miles away, and fire the arms.
Taking out their eyes and ears.
Essentially, yes. Blinding their air defense network, making the airspace much safer for any follow-on strikes.
And speaking of strikes from different places, submarine got involved too. That seems less common for this kind of operation.
It's definitely a less visible element, but potent. Starting around 06.4, a U.S. submarine, a Los Angeles-class attack sub, launched its own strikes.
From underwater?
How? They can fire Tomahawk missiles, same as the destroyers, either through their standard torpedo tubes or on some boats' dedicated vertical launch cells.
And what were they targeting?
In this case, secondary Houthi command posts down in the Damar Governorate.
And they didn't just lob 1 or 2.
No, this is actually a bit unusual. They fired a pretty significant salvo, over a dozen Tomahawks, reportedly all launched through the torpedo tubes.
Wow. A dozen Tomahawks from a sub.
Yeah, quite a demonstration. By about 07.9, those missiles hit. destroying 4 more command posts, further disrupting their ability to manage things.
The coordination here is just staggering. Air, surface ships, now submarines, all hitting different targets. But it still wasn't over. The P-8 Poseidon joined in. Isn't that usually for watching ships and subs?
That's its main job, yeah. Maritime patrol, anti-submarine warfare. But this shows the platform's versatility. Around 09.15, a P-8 showed off its land attack capability.
It can attack land targets.
It can, using AGM-84 SLAM-air missiles. Standoff Land Attack Missile Expanded Response.
SLAM-air, what are they like?
Pretty advanced. They're supersonic, long range, up to 270 kilometers.
So another standoff weapon. What did the P-8 hit?
This was just one P-8 flying over the Red Sea. It fired a salvo of slammers targeting multiple radar sites, specifically those covering the Al Houthi governorate again.
More radar sites, really hammering the air defenses.
Exactly. By 09.30, those sites were reported destroyed, further degrading their ability to track incoming aircraft or missiles.
Okay, so by mid-morning, it feels like they've systematically taken apart command centers, drone facilities, power, underground bunkers, air defense radars.
But there's one more big act, right? The B-52s.
Ah, yes, the grand finale, you could say.
Yep.
Around noon local time, the B-52 Stratofortress arrived.
The BUFF. Iconic. Hadn't seen those in the Middle East for a while.
Not since 2019, apparently. These were based out of Qatar for this operation. And you know, the B-52's reputation, payload.
Huge payload. How much can they carry?
About 70,000 pounds of ordnance. In this case, they were loaded with JDAMs again, the 2,000-pound GPS-guided bombs. A single B-52 can carry 35 of them.
35 2,000-pound bombs on one plane.
It's incredible firepower. But, you know, the B-52, it's an older design, relatively slow. Flying it into a defended airspace could be very risky.
Which is why all the earlier strikes against the air defenses were so important. Absolutely critical. By the time the B-52s arrived, the Houthi air defense network was severely degraded, if not largely eliminated in the target areas. So what could have been a dangerous mission became, as some reportedly called it, a milk run.
A milk run, dropping 70,000 pounds of bombs. That's quite the image. What did they hit?
They went after Houthi barracks and any remaining weapons storage sites in Sana'a that hadn't been hit in the earlier waves by the Navy or the other Air Force jets. They just blanketed the targets with those 70 JDAMs.
A comprehensive sweep-up, basically. Yeah. So end of day one, this massive multi-phase operation. What was the feeling on the U.S. side? Sounds like a success.
Initial assessments were very positive, yes. U.S. commanders seemed quite pleased. Over 40 significant targets confirmed destroyed.
And crucially,
no American losses reported, 0 casualties. So from the perspective of executing the plan, hitting the targets, and bringing everyone home safe, it looked like a major success. The crews involved probably felt they'd delivered a really substantial blow.
Okay, sounds like mission accomplished for day one.
Yeah.
But there's always a but in these situations, isn't there? The story didn't, quote, end there on March 15th.
That's right. Things took a bit of a turn later that day, around 18.0 local time, so early evening.
Yeah.
The radars on 2 U.S. destroyers, the USS Stout and the USS Jason Dunham, suddenly lit up. A whole flurry of incoming contacts detected.
Incoming.
Yeah.
After all that. From the Houthis.
It appeared so. It was a clear sign that despite the pounding they'd taken all day, despite losing command centers, drones, radars, they were far from defeated. They still had fight left in them.
Wow. So even after this incredibly sophisticated, coordinated, multi-domain attack, they could still launch something. That really makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. It raises big questions about the lasting impact of these kinds of strikes. The U.S. operation was impressive. The precision, the coordination across air, sea, subsurface was remarkable. They definitely degraded key Houthi capabilities. Drone stuff, command posts, air defenses, power. But this immediate reappearance of threats, it just underscores how resilient and adaptable adversaries like the Houthis can be.
Exactly. Does it mean their network was deeper, more hidden, maybe decentralized command that wasn't hit? Or just reserves they held back? And what does the U.S. do then if the first massive punch doesn't knock them out?
These are the tough questions. It shows the limits, maybe, of purely kinetic strikes against determined groups. Achieving real, lasting strategic goals in these complex conflicts, it's incredibly challenging.
It makes you wonder what truly constitutes success and how you achieve genuine stability in a region like that. It's definitely something to keep thinking about.